Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live today, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We are coming at you. And my partner in crime here, Will Schroeder, will introduce him in just a moment. But every Tuesday, we do pitch decks, and that's what we are going to be doing today. We're going to be taking a look at pitch decks, and we're going to be asking the question, not only do you have a pitch deck that's going to raise, but does it unicorn? Those are the questions we want to ask. We want to explore these topics and really get in nitty gritty. Use the Q&A box if you're joining us in the audience. Thank you so much to all the members here at Startups.com and everybody joining us on the interwebs like YouTube and social media. Do the social media thing, like, comment, subscribe. We love to hear your feedback. And as encouragement, ask as many questions as you want. We are ready to get going. Will, you are a 9-time founder, 5 exits. You've raised gads of money. You've worked with startups that have raised gads of money. How many pitch decks do you look at a week? What's that like?
Countless. It's like literally could count. I've looked at thousands of pitch decks in my career. And so what's interesting about it is, like, the cool thing about our job is that we get to see every idea you could possibly imagine, which is, it's fun, right? It's engaging. But we also get to see all the patterns, all the challenges, like, when founders put together their pitch deck and they're like, this is it. This is exactly how it should look. And we're like, oh my God, like, you've never done this before, which is totally fine. Most people haven't. I hadn't, right? But here's how we're going to get you through it. Here's how we're going to show you, like, the perfect pitch deck and how to do this, which is what we'll do on this episode. But it's awesome because, like, I appreciate the enthusiasm.
Yes.
I don't really care what the status your pitch deck is. My job to help you.
You know what? Speaking about enthusiasm, Will, we have some members in our audience, some founders that have just endeared themselves to me. And let me just give a shout out to some of you founders out there without calling you out directly, but just how open founders are, saying, all right, just give me the feedback. Just hit me right between the eyes. Now, truth be told, I will confess, sometimes I can get a little intense with my feedback, and and some founders, they take it personally, right? And I get it. You're putting yourself out there. But we got some founders here in the audience that have just really dug in and said, hey, give me the feedback. I can handle it. I got a thick skin, soft heart. I'm a big kid. And they keep iterating and going about it. And I know you're giving the feedback as well. And Will, that's just so appreciated.
Yep. And also, it's not easy to do. Right.
No.
It's one of those things, like, even the person giving the feedback, you and I, Ed, our job isn't to, like, I don't get any pleasure out of making you upset. Right. Like, there's no version where I'm like, oh, I'll show you how wrong you are. Like, what kind of jerk would that be? Right.
Yeah.
Like, when I see that on Shark Tank, I mean, it's performative, right? Like, that's a show.
Yeah.
But, like, where, like, the sharks are getting excited about tearing apart the entrepreneur, I'm like, what a douchebag. Right. Like, that person's pouring their heart out. Like, why would you respond to that? Again, I get it. It's television. But I've also seen that in real life.
Yes.
I don't understand it. I don't get it.
We are not here to make television. We're here to help you founders. Before we continue, just want to say that this episode and everything we do at Startups.com live during these videos is brought to you by us, Startups.com. If you haven't checked us out yet, feel free to join us there. We have just a bevy of resources. I haven't used the word bevy in a while, Will.
Great use of bevy, Ed. Way to dial that in.
But it is a bevy of resources. Plethora, that's another word I haven't used in a while. And we've got videos for you. We've got forums, communications, all types of playbooks, different resources. Come check us out. Will, what's your invitation?
I think on this one, you've listened to this video, watched this video, whatever, and you say, hey, this is great. We have like 10,000 of these. Like, some of them are on YouTube, but we've been recording these things for over a decade. So, like, any question you could possibly have, and we haven't covered it in our YouTube channel, I guarantee we've covered it 20 times over on the website. So by all means, go there and ask a million questions. That's what we're there for.
And it just keeps getting better. We keep adding more and more to it. And once again, just want to remind everybody here in the audience, we are here for you. You can abscond this episode with your questions, derail us, distract us, test us. We are here for you to answer all the questions. Keep them ready, get going. We got Jen lurking in the chat here just to make sure that we're going to answer all your questions. Make sure you use the Q&A box or the chat. Will, this comes to us from 2 founders that I've really enjoyed getting to know, and I know you've spent time with them before. And let's take a look at this pitch deck. And once again, as always, for those of you who are watching, if you have your own pitch deck, you want me and Will to spend some time on it and work through some feedback and then get you this recording, help you improve, let us know. Contact us via the usual channels. We are here for you. Will, we got a way together, experiencing better experiences. Let's give the first impressions right away. What are you thinking as soon as you see this?
I think if this was their mascot, it would be adorable as hell. That looks like AI, like it's nobody's business, and I love it.
It's merch.
Um,
That's what you got to do. Sell the merch.
yeah. Here's what I would say. We've got the Away Together logo, right, which is cool. And we've got a fairly complex graphic. And I'm not trying to overthink this. I came from the marketing world and the agency world, so I do overthink this stuff. I think it's a little busy, but it's not bad. But it's got good energy. I like the energy.
Yes, you got some colors, you got some branding. As always, the tagline, experiencing better experiences. I understand, I can appreciate marketing, but you always want to at least explain what your startup does, have a one-liner that just lets the investor know, what am I looking at? Because right here, I could be looking at an ad on a billboard or something completely different. It's just not the best use of that tagline.
Well, also, remember, your deck's going to get shared a whole bunch without you in the room. And the only thing you can guarantee everyone will see is the first slide. So to your point, Ed, I want to get rid of the just do it style tagline. And I want to put, this is exactly in 4 words what this business does.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. All right. So first, we're getting to our story. Now, let's set this up because this could easily be a pitch deck that's presented with voiceover live, but let's look at it from the standpoint that you have a screener introductory deck, one that gets uploaded online. There's a link in the outreach email, and look at our pitch deck. And then we click on it as investors and we look at this and we come to this slide. Will, what happens?
We bail. Now, it's not the founder's fault, but it's really, really, really important to understand how your deck is going to get digested. Couple high points. Number one, 90% of the time, it will get digested without you, meaning you're not in the room. In 100% of the cases, Ed, back me up if you feel comfortable on this, every investor is going to ask you to set their deck ahead of time, right? They're not just going to say, hey, we'll see how it goes, and I'll just have you show up in my office, right? Like, rare. So the deck has to stand on its own, we call it naked, without you presenting it. So when you send this one over, it's got to be able to be something people can digest without you. And that has a whole bunch of considerations. What the founders sent us may have been the deck that they just happened to use to present. But it's really important to know there are often 2 decks. There's the deck you email ahead of time called the email deck, and then there's the deck you present. They're often different. They don't have to be. My preference is that they're the same, but they can be different. If you've got something here where you're going to tell a story and try to deliver some emotion, that definitely isn't on the email deck. It's on the presentation deck, which is maybe what we're looking at. So, that they might have a different deck.
I can see a world where if I'm presenting this live, I could say me and my partner were on vacation and we ended up in this massive rainstorm. And so you got visuals that are supporting you as the narrator.
Yeah.
Fine. But Will, let's explore this just for a moment, because I know founders try and insert our story or some type of introductory slide right up front with maybe like a little paragraph explaining the pain that they went through. Yeah. What are your thoughts on those types of slides in other types of pitch decks?
When it works great, and it rarely works. Okay?
That's a good way of saying it.
I've done this before where I used to try to open up my decks with a personal story. And again, I'd been presenting in the agency world like an ungodly number of presentations. So I was used to like big dramatic Steve Jobs like presentations. Most people can't pull that off. Also, I was an actor. So like most people can't pull that off where they can like go into a room and like blow people away with a story. So a lot of times when I hear the story, it just gets told like a bad commercial.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really convey the emotion that it deserves. And so it's a little bit of a gamble. Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, like you said, it'd be one thing if on the left side I had a picture standing and I was an amputee. Let's go extreme. And then the next side of it, I've got robot arms and I look like Iron Man, right? This is my story. This is my startup. That's pretty spectacular. But most startups can't illustrate that in such an impactful way. So that's where you're just going to lose the investor. And you start behind the 8 ball. Like you already dug yourself a hole. You don't want to take that chance.
It is a bit of a gamble. And I guess when it works great. And I've seen just what you talked about, where somebody tells like a heart-wrenching story and you just look at that and go, okay, I get it. Right. I had a founder pitch me in person over a dinner toward the middle of last year. And he shows me his finger and it's all like, I've never seen a finger bend in so many directions it's not supposed to bend. And he said, this ended my NFL career. Right. And as he was saying that, I was like, I just want to point out, you have a giant ring on that other finger. He's like, oh yeah, that's a Super Bowl ring, right? Like, it's like, if you're going to end it, that's a pretty good way to end it. But anyway, my point is, he was creating a glove essentially for all kinds of folks, for receivers in the NFL, but also for fire workers, et cetera, to help prevent these kinds of injuries. So it made sense. I'm like, this guy went through it. It clearly ended his career. And I thought that was a powerful component to the story. Mainly just wanted to wear his ring. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, great story. I'll give you another example. Story gone wrong. I'm doing a pitch for a business I did a long time ago, and I'm on Silicon Valley in Sand Hill Road. And in the opening of my pitch, which was a way to buy things using weekly payments, it's essentially what a firm is now, I explained that I'd grown up very poor, and that in my family, a $400 purchase was life-changing. Like if we were going to spend $400 on something, we had to forgo everything else, and we probably didn't have $400. So I'm telling this personal story about how I want to build something for people like me, and I'll never forget the VC looks at me, and he's like, hey, jerk, we saw you pull up in a Bentley. He called me out, and I was so humiliated. I almost didn't want to give the rest of the presentation. It wasn't that my story wasn't true. I mean, a couple of things had happened since then. But like, if your story isn't believable, and he had no problem calling me out on it, you also look like a douche, which is exactly what happened to me.
And investors will call you out on that. Let me tell you, sit through enough of these, and your patience starts to wear thin, and your bedside manner.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the safe slide. And there's a reason that most pitch decks start with the problem slide. It really was made popular by, I would say it's called the Sequoia way. I see this all the time. But problems just make sense. And I talk to investors, they say, I just want to start off with the problem slide, like a nice cover in the problem slide. Let's look at this cover or this problem slide. Hotels fall short in meeting guest expectations, losing valuable data post-checkout, failing to maintain guest engagement in real time. You got 92% review, negative reviews, 81%, and then 63%. What are your thoughts?
Those are so many different problems.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I love these founders. So when I say this, and I'll give kind of our typical disclaimer, I love when people let us present our decks. So first off, to the founders, thank you. And I'm sure Ed reflects this. Thank you for allowing us to talk about your deck and make these comments. So I'm going to say that with full consideration. However, I know the founders, I know the product. I hate this problem statement. I hate this problem statement because I don't feel like it does their product justice. I think they have a great idea, and this problem statement doesn't reflect any of it. Now, I have the benefit of actually knowing what the product is, but even if I didn't, here's what I'd say, Ed. Here's how I'd unpack it, and I'm really curious to hear how you unpack it. Negative reviews about hotels, I would think to myself, okay, that's like a whole business, right, around negative reviews, okay? Hotel apps that are deleted upon departure due to functionality on hotel apps, totally different business, right? Totally different problem. Travelers who are disappointed with access to real-time cultural activities, I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with negative reviews of hotel? Like, and so Ed, we talk about this a lot. Whenever a problem statement doesn't take us down a path to say this is probably what solution we're going to head toward, it's a huge problem. What's your take?
Before my take, let me ask you this question, Will. Why do founders do this? Because we see this all the time. And it's not an indictment on founders. Like we fundamentally know, but let's talk about what's the psychology that gets a founder to like talk about 50 different things and cram them into the problem statement to try and do what? What's going through their mind?
They're so afraid. We all are. I get it. And when I say they, I mean we. We're so afraid that we'll not have said something. That if we don't talk about this aspect of the idea and that aspect of the idea and that aspect of the idea, that no one will appreciate it. But that assumption that we didn't say everything is wildly broken for some ways we initially don't think about. Number one, we've been thinking about this idea, this concept, this opportunity for months, years, however long. Our audience has been thinking about it for 4 seconds, okay? So for us, we can immediately jump into all the different aspects of the problem. What we forget is that our audience is still trying to understand what the problem was to begin with, right? They're not looking for the breadth of the problem. They're looking to figure out what the hell the problem is to begin with.
Exactly. And let's pull the cover off from an investor standpoint. As an investor, I'm sitting here going, okay, if you come to me and say global warming is a problem, we use this all the time, or you say the financial industry is broken, millennials don't have money, old people can't retire, inflation's killing us, so therefore finances are broken. As an investor, I'm thinking to myself, you are not going to solve that problem. Like you just are not realistic. And if you think that you're going to impress me by saying I can solve all that or talk about it, no, I want to know what part of the problem can you actually solve to get users, make money, make sure my money's protected, and then maybe expand into those other things. But I really need to know that you have the ability to focus on a problem, and that's from an investor standpoint.
Here's another way to think about it. When I walk into the room with this problem, with this concept, what are the fewest amount of words that you can tell me to get me initially hooked? See, instead of just giving me a bite, the founder wants to give me the whole thing, the whole enchilada.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it works never, to be clear. Right? When you try to force feed every aspect of your problem into the problem statement at the beginning of the presentation, in a conversation, for that matter, no one can digest that much information. You can because you already have the context for it all. Ed, you can appreciate this. Not 10 minutes before this, we were recording, I was arguing with somebody on Twitter, like what else do you do on Twitter, about Bitcoin, right?
Right.
One of these Bitcoin fanboys, and someone was complaining to him about Bitcoin. He's trying to defend it. And I said to him, why is it that the only time people talk about Bitcoin is when they're defending it, right? If Bitcoin is so valuable, then why for 15 years nobody seemed to understand what it does? And this isn't me trashing Bitcoin. It was a very honest question. When I talk to folks about Bitcoin, within the first 5 seconds, they just unload on me with a whole bunch of like concepts and everything. And I'm like, dude, you didn't even explain to me why it was useful to begin with. Now you're trying to tell me like we're demolishing fiat. I'm like, dude, like I don't care about any of that. Tell me in the simplest words why this thing is important. And by the way, no one can ever do it. I've yet to see someone do it. And that's my point. I'm like, why do you make this so complex? It's like you're trying not to make me understand it. So as it relates to the problem statement, make it simple, man. What are the simplest words you can use to make me go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, let's move on.
Let's get back to this problem statement. And by the way, everyone, I am a Bitcoin degenerate through and through, heavy investor. Will and I, we love to agree to disagree on stuff. If you ever want to commiserate with me on Bitcoin, please let me know out there.
Please talk to Ed, not me.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get back to the problem statement. Okay, so Will, what would you do? Let's help this founder in terms of what they should do with this slide.
The review we're about to do here isn't entirely fair because how we typically do this is we've never really heard of the product, et cetera. In this case, I know what the product is, so kind of cheating a little bit. But here's the first thing I want to do. Hotels fall short in meeting guests' expectations, right? Pause. What expectations? Okay. That could mean a million things. Right there, you failed to tell me what that actually means. So, okay, sure. Losing valuable data post-checkout. Why would that have anything to do with falling short of meeting guest expectations? See, now it's a non sequitur. Now we're saying this, but that, right?
Right on. Yep.
Okay. In failing to maintain guest engagement in real time. What the hell does that have to do with losing valuable data post-checkout? You see how what we did is we just went in 3 different paths simultaneously in the same sentence, making it impossible for me as the audience to key in on which one of those is important. And then within those, I still don't actually know what those problems are. Hotels fall short meeting guest expectations. What expectations? And the cardinal sin, how many hotels?
Exactly. How big is the market?
Correct. So what you need to tell me is, as an example, in the US, 5,692 hotels fall short in meeting these guest expectations, which leads to this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So we have to say, here's what the issue was, and here's what the outcome, like the pain of that issue. None of that's present here.
Right. How should founders, let's say, they're sitting there and they go, yeah, I could go in all these multiple directions. And now Will and Ed are telling me I should pick one and really explain it, add size, scope, and severity, what it costs. Like if you don't solve the problem, I get it.
Sure.
How do they pick?
Okay. Go through this all the time. Here's how we do it. I take every problem that you could possibly think of, and all I say is rank them. I need you to say these are all important, but this one's a little bit more important than that one. Then we take that exercise. Let's say we had 10 problems, Ed. Say we had 10, and we ranked them 1 through 10, 1 being the most important. First, here's the exercise. If you only solved problem number 1, could this still be a business? And if the answer is yeah, it could, stop. Stop right there.
You win. You did.
You win, right?
Yeah.
If you absolutely have to have number 2. In order for 1 to be true, number 2 gets included. If you absolutely have to have number 3 in order for number 2 to get included, then you include number 3. That is the rationale that you use. Now, it is rare that you have to have all 3. If you have to be at 4, things are going to get real complex. The ideal number is 1. Okay, I'm not saying you have to be 1. I'm saying the ideal number is 1 because it's the simplest. 2 is okay. 3 gets a little bit gnarly, and 4 works never.
Right.
So as you add more, you substantially make the problem more complex.
Okay, but let's talk about a very common thing that I see founders do all the time.
Yeah.
That is they create a solution looking for a problem. So they actually start
It's a whole other challenge, yeah.
Yeah, by saying, I want this gizmo, I think it'd be cool, and I have an itch I want to scratch. And then it's like, oh, but I need investors. And so Will and Ed, Startups.com tells me, I need to have a problem statement. So they run out and they just throw everything against the wall and they test it and they spin the puzzle piece. And so in many cases, Will, I don't know if you've experienced this, but often I will ask the founder, go back to the original intent. What did you first think of when you were doing this before you started thinking, I got to attract investors and I have to jump through all these hoops and lace my startup up with all this superfluous stuff for investors? And then I'll usually find something and I'll say, okay, so let's talk about that problem. How is it painful? And then we realize, you know what? Millions of other people have the problem. I should just stay here and not add everything else. And that usually can get to the heart of when you have a solution looking for a problem. I don't know what you think.
There's no such thing as a used product that doesn't have a problem. I'll give you an example. When we talk about consumer packaged goods, for a lot of our founders on the Startups.com platform, they seem to have a harder time coming up with problem statements, right?
True.
Because it's like, well, it's banana ice cream. Like, there's no problem statement, right?
Yeah.
Or it's a new type of lipstick. There's no problem statement. And I said, bullshit. There's always a problem statement. Otherwise, people are never going to buy your product. If the product is a new type of lipstick, then the problem statement is how a woman feels when she walks into a room, right? Currently, this is how she feels because her product lets her down. She doesn't feel validated. She doesn't feel important. She doesn't feel, et cetera. That's the problem. And that's the kind of emotion we need to pull from the problem statement to explain that when she uses this product, she feels amazing.
Let me double click on that. Other ways that I've been able to come up with problem statements. For example, okay, entertainment. Boredom is a problem, but then it's further exacerbated by a gap in the type of entertainment that people want. If you can identify that and say there are like 30 million people that want to watch, I don't know, YouTube videos about talking gerbils wearing cowboy costumes, and you can prove that out, that's a problem. Right. Yeah. Like statement that is perfectly valid. Investors will say, wow, 30 million, and we had a niche problem I didn't know. That actually has legs, but you got to talk about problems, because if you're not sharing problems and it'd be a nice to have, I think everybody should have it. Well, that doesn't make a business. That doesn't give the investor confidence that he's going to make money. Or she's going to make money. The investor is not going to get a return.
Yeah, agreed. And look, the funny thing is the demo you just mentioned probably exists and probably is a 30 million person problem. But here's the key, and this was coming up in a little bit of our chat as we're talking. We don't win by being comprehensive about talking about everything. We win by being highly specific. Now, that doesn't mean we can't talk about the other stuff throughout the deck.
Yes.
Like, this all doesn't have to be like force-fed into the problem statement. The problem statement is just a teaser to the rest of the deck. So for example, let's say that for this particular startup, that the startup was like, hey, we have actually 3 different aspects to a problem we solve. And what I'm going to say is, ideally stick with one to start. When we get into how it works, we can expand on that. When we get into our go-to-market, we can expand on that. There's lots of other places where we can expand the thinking, but not at the expense of losing the investor from the get-go. The fastest way to lose an investor is make this slide more complicated. It benefits you zero.
In fact, making the slide more complicated makes the investor work. And the investor's already put in a ton of work just to get here. You don't want to do that. And believe me, we investors want to hear founders talk about more expansive problems, talk about the future, talk about the vision. But again, like you said, well, not at the expense of the initial focus to ensure the startup has the best chance to succeed in the early phases.
I've heard a million pitches. I've yet to hear a pitch where I was like, they didn't make it nearly complicated enough in the problem slide.
Yeah.
Never had that problem.
Okay, let's move into the solution, and maybe we can massage the problem and solution together based on what they say, because we have inside information. It says here, an engaging, secure app uniting the digital travel experience to increase real-time host to guest, guest to guest, and local connectivity, and maintain the traveler's data. And then we got 3 percentages here again. Let's get back to it.
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means. If I were to get up now and go in the other room and ask my wife, what does this mean? Read her that sentence, and she's a super smart person that's worked at multiple startups, she would have no idea, right? This sentence makes no sense. Now, when I say that, I'm not trying to be critical. The sentence makes no sense because I don't have the context that the founder has. And this is the problem with every pitch deck, right, initially. The founder knows exactly what the product is, but forgets that the audience doesn't. So when you're saying a secure app uniting the digital travel experience, you know what that means. You know, and you have a clear understanding of what the digital travel experience is. Guess what? I have no idea what that means.
On top of which, okay, here's where I'll give it points, because this is just a basic that a lot of founders miss out on, is explaining what their solution actually is versus what it does. So the fact that we say it's an app, great. That's a basic starting point a lot of founders miss. But here's where I get stuck, Will. It's like uniting digital travel experience, okay, inside fluffy language, to increase real-time host-to-guest communication. So let's just say it's real-time communication. The issue, Will, is that it never shows up in the problem. Not once did we mention that real-time or lack of real-time communication is a problem, and now it's popping up in the solution. That's a disconnect.
We talk about it a little, jump back for a second, but you're still right. Bottom right corner, travelers who are disappointed with access to real-time, but hold on, real-time cultural activities. Yeah. Real-time cultural activities aren't the same as real-time communications. Let's isolate this problem, because it is the crux of the issue of creating a problem and solution statement, which have to work synergistically. I never get to use the word synergistically enough. I feel like I need to be in a boardroom and say synergistic. They have to work synergistically. Whatever we say is the problem are the parameters, the boundaries of what we're allowed to say is the solution.
Precisely.
We can't make a single assertion, concept, whatever in the solution that we did not say was a problem.
Amen. Preach it, Will. Preach it.
Hallelujah. But listen, if we go, let's go back to the solution. What we're still running into, right, is look, the 98% travelers who say being aware of real-time happenings increases their satisfaction level. Cool, but that's not your solution. You might say in that sentence, yeah, but I said that was the solution. You're dropping a bunch of stats and concepts, and you're hoping that the audience will make the same connection to that information that you did. Let nothing be a guess. Let nothing be a gamble. If there's a specific point you want to make, or more specifically, something you want somebody to take away from a statement, just say it, right? In other words, I might say in the problem slide, I'm paraphrasing. Travelers hate traveling because they can't communicate effectively to the hotel, which means all the cool shit that they want to do never gets communicated to them.
Right on. Cool. That's a good one.
We built a solution where the audience says, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. And the hotel has constant feeds that tell them exactly where to do it and how to do it. That's a simple explanation. By all means, wordsmith it. But that's a simple explanation. That's what we're looking for. That's something that anyone can understand. And Ed, when I'm reviewing decks or building my own pitches, here's the scenario I always use, and it seems to work for me. I picture sitting next to somebody, some stranger in an airplane, and they say, hey, what do you do? And whatever words are about to come out of my mouth is exactly this pitch. And so like now, I work at Startups.com, and people say, hey, what do you do? Here's what I tell them. I said, well, 40 million people every year want to start a startup company, but 0 of them know what the hell they're doing. We tell them what to do, right? That's it. That's my pitch. Right? Now, there's more nuance to that. There's a lot we do, right? But what I'm setting up the fact is that like an awful lot of people globally don't know how to start a startup, and most people understand that, and that we show them how to start a startup. Now, they'll then ask, well, what do you do within that? And I'll explain it. But I've given them the context, the basis. I've kind of brought them in the room to be able to have that discussion, which is what this should do.
Let's pull out some of the principles just on your pitch right there. In both pitches, the one you just wordsmithed for A Way Together and for Startups.com, you started off with 40 million people. You didn't say, and I double click on this because I see so many pitch decks. And yes, some of you in the audience right now, your pitch decks were guilty of this, is you didn't say 80% of founders, don't know how to You said 40 million founders, and you talk right about that. And that's one of the key things, because that makes an investor's eyes kind of go wide and say, ooh, this is a nice big fat market. And then you talk about the pain of this. And if you can add that, like how many of those investors or how many of those founders are going to fail, or how many hotels, how much money they potentially lose because they're not solving the problem. Now you're adding in the basics that at least keeps the investor at the table to look through the rest of your pitch deck. That's all we need to do, Will.
You bet. And in my example, what I use for Startups.com, it's not necessarily what I would put in a pitch deck. It's how I start that conversation. And it seems very effective. I've been using it for a decade. But when I'm concepting for how I would write what's on these two slides, I'm always putting myself in that position where I'm sitting next to a stranger on an airplane, which implies a few things. It implies this person, I have no idea who they are or what their background is, so I have to have an explanation that anyone could understand. It implies that I have a short window of time because I'm just sitting next to them on an airplane. Technically, they're stuck with me, but they're not going to give me a lot of attention. And it implies that in that short period of time, if they understand what I just said, they might be more interested.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a question or we had a comment. Let's expand on this. Maybe the reason why founders want to mention so many details is because when they're pitching different people, you often find that different people pick up on different aspects of the business. So if you leave some details out, do you risk one of those being the key thing that would have got them interested? What's your response to that?
I mean, always possible, right? To be clear, if what you're saying is, hey, maybe they're interested in this one feature that I didn't mention, right? Always possible, always possible. But what you're doing in that case is you're then shoehorning that feature and expanding the explanation. Now you've affected and slowed down everybody because one person might pick up on that, right? What you're doing is you're kind of poisoning the well because you think it might save one person. It typically just doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. And frankly, most folks, once they understand the general concept, they'll ask the other questions. It's not like if you don't put everything here, it'll never get talked about. Also important to note, when we send the pitch deck ahead of time and people review it, they're just getting in the ballpark. They don't expect every question to be answered. They're not looking for a comprehensive business plan. They just want to know, oh, you're in the healthcare industry, it's a SaaS product, and it solves this problem. Okay, let's talk about it. And then I'll get into all these details and questions.
A couple comments I have on this one. One, what you're describing, Will, is the age-old adage, you sell to everyone, you sell to no one. So you pitch to everyone, you pitch to no one.
Yep.
But on top of which, here's the thing. Investors don't care what they want. They care about what customers want. And so if you've got legitimate data and you've done your homework and you plant your flag and you're out there and you say 40 million founders have this specific problem, and I know I got the insight, an investor's going to say, I may never have had that problem, but hallelujah, thank you so much for going out there. I like it, and they'll be interested. So don't worry about that. Go and validate and make sure that you're solving problems that a market cares about. Stay focused, and investors are going to reward that focus versus, oh, you didn't talk about that little minor feature, that tertiary benefit that you could have mentioned. Believe me, it goes a long way in just focusing on the one thing that you're going to really go after until maybe it's not. Maybe you get some feedback and you have to start adjusting and iterating, but focus is going to reward you so many more times than not.
You bet. If people don't believe in the core of what you do, no one's going to say, oh, I don't care about that, but this feature is great.
Exactly.
Right? The core of what you do has to be what you lead with and what you draw people in with, and that's where the sale comes from.
Let's move to the next slide here to try and get through a few more. So product slide right away. So we had problem, solution, product slide, which we can talk about that in just a moment, but let's look at this for what it is. Away Together is a SaaS mobile app for hotels that allows for real-time communication between guests as well as hotel to guest, all while supporting sustainability initiatives. And then you've got some bullet points there. You got some screenshots.
My memory isn't the best, but I'm fairly sure that description is verbatim what was on the previous page.
Yeah, let's confirm. Right here,
okay.
Solution. All right, engage in secure app, uniting digital travel experiences, guest to guest, host to guest, connectivity, maintain travelers' data, and then pow, we do real-time communication, guest to hotel. But then we've added sustainability initiatives, Will.
Why?
Yeah, my question, right, exactly.
But if I'm looking at these 6 bullets, so to speak here, I don't see anything about sustainability.
Yeah.
You?
Oh, this threw me for a loop right there when I read it.
Okay, let's back up as to what this page is supposed to do. This slide is supposed to do, okay? So part of where it's missing the mark is it's just not doing what it's supposed to do, okay? This is essentially the product, which is often known as the How It Works slide. Mm-hmm. How It Works slide is supposed to do 3 things. It's supposed to remind me what the customer's core problem was, okay? Kind of what was in the problem. That's step 1. The next step should be, and this is how they use our app to solve that problem. Step 2. And then the third part is, and this is why they get the benefit that we provide every time when they do so. Step 3. Okay. So again, what problem did they have? Step 1, how did they use our app or our solution to solve it? And how were they wildly successful at life once they did? In this one, there's a bunch of stuff that, I always run into a challenge. Number 1, screenshots suck. I'm not saying never use them, but almost every single time a screenshot tells me nothing. It adds no new information. We all love doing it because we work so hard on these apps, right? Or whatever the product is.
Oh, yeah.
But if the screenshot doesn't give me some sort of specific information that I couldn't have otherwise gotten, it's in the way. And I know that's heretical to people here. It's like, nobody talking about it. It's the How It Works. It's our product. It's possible to have a bunch of screenshots that are nothing but distracting and tell us nothing. If nothing else, use a screenshot that's really useful. Like something on there like, oh, damn, if I didn't see that screenshot, I wouldn't have understood. That's a great screenshot. A lot of times they're just bad screenshots.
Yes. You want to, okay, let's get back to the original principle here. You want to avoid redundancy, right? You want to avoid introducing new concepts late in the game. That's what we got because we couldn't connect sustainability. Well, I'm going to argue that this slide actually functions closer to what we wanted as a solution slide type thing, right? Let's explore just a little more and see if we can piece a few things together. Now we got the market opportunity. So ideally, everyone, it's problem, solution, market size. That's really what investors are used to. And once again, you can deviate, but give investors what they're used to. Like, don't give them the cognitive friction to go, hey, this is not what I expected. Follow along on that. But take a look at this market side. So we start off with 1 million hotels, and then we have, they're kind of doing, TAM, SAM, SOM, 900K independents and the multiple unit owners, and their beachhead, which is their SOM, is independent hotels in U.S. and Caribbean, average monthly cost $250, I guess is what they're paying.
The audience listening to what you just said, and as you were trying to decipher it, which of course you did, it allows me to make a simple point, which is instead of forcing Ed to go through all of what he just did, he does this 1,000,000 times. He is so good at this. Write a single sentence at the top.
Right on.
To tell him exactly what you want him to take away from this slide. This does so many things for you. Number 1, what it does, it leaves 0 chance that Ed's going to interpret this differently than you do. So you may look at it and say, for this single declarative sentence at the top of this slide, you may say, there are 2 million hotels that absolutely need this product, of which we plan on locking up 2,000 of them within the first year. Something like that, right?
Yeah. Good.
In other words, do not give Ed any opportunity, Ed being the investor, do not give Ed any opportunity to freestyle what you might mean from this, right? That does not end well for anyone. Say this is exactly what you need to take away from this. Here's why. There's a 90% chance that when people look at your graphs, slides, pictures, etc., they will take away something very different than what you want them to take away. Okay? It happens all the time. We put it out there and like, well, of course he's going to digest it this way. This is what it means. Cool. But you have the understanding of what it means. Ed doesn't. You just saw him go through it. He's like, oh, I think it's TAM, SAM, SOM. I think it's... Ed, you do this for a living.
Yeah.
right? Don't let Ed freestyle. Give him the lyrics. Give him exactly what you want him to know. It's just, that's good on every slide, by the way. We just happen to be on TAM.
Yes. And, this is where I am going to say, okay, the basic mechanics are here. We're not doing a top down and say the hotel hospitality industry is $3 trillion. Okay, we're not doing that. We're actually breaking it down bottom up. This is something that all founders need to learn. Bottom up is you take how many people total could use your product and would want that times how much you're willing to spend. In this case, is $3,000 a year, and that's $3 billion annually. Okay, great. But absolutely correct. If it doesn't really make sense, this is where I'm getting disconnect, Will, is I'm not connecting for some reason. And this is because I don't know the industry and you don't want to leave it to chance. Just like, in MMA fights, don't leave it to the referees, okay? Don't leave it to the investor's mind. 1 million hotels, 900K independents, and then multiple unit owners. I don't know what that I don't know the logic there, and that's where I get lost here.
I think that compounds a bit. What we're also not telling the audience is why are we starting there? That's one of the most important messages on this slide.
Exactly.
To say, here are the high slice of the market, but here's why we're starting with this one. This would almost imply that the service is initially more valuable to multiple unit owners than it is to independents, than it is to hotels, because typically you radiate out with your highest and best use customers first, your early adopters, and then radiate out to the larger market. I don't know that I would understand either what multiple unit owners are, nor why they're a better fit for this product is, which is a big problem for this slide.
Furthermore, you just set me up to say these hotels have this problem because they're not doing real time with cultural, social sustainability. You've added all this stuff. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, don't hotels, wouldn't this benefit hotels the most? Why would a multiple unit owner benefit from that? And so it's these disconnects. And what Will is demonstrating is the thoughtfulness that an investor wants to see you as a founder that you've gone through to make sure that you understand how all this is interconnected. Dare I say how all this synergizes together? There's the word. We're sounding like Big Five consultants right now. But that's the whole thing is the reason all these slides are important is because investors want to see how you've worked through that and your thoughtfulness behind it. So you can't just willy-nilly and slap some stuff together and say, I'm just like, Will, you talk about this all the time. It's like, I'm just checking the boxes on a mortgage. That is not this. It's not going to pass the sniff test.
But now look, we've gotten to the market size slide and we still have no idea what this product actually does. Okay. And the thing is, you and I do know what the product does because we spent time with these wonderful founders, but the audience, as they're looking at it, fresh eyes, we lost the ability to take this great idea that the founders have, and this hurts my soul, this great idea that the founders have, and it got lost in translation on the pitch deck. And this happens all the time. This isn't like a one-off event. I mean, it's usually how it happens. And I look at that and I'm saying, damn, that founder was going to go out there and they were going to pitch their hearts out and they were going to get rejected by investors and not even know why. Not even know why. And like, oh, I guess they didn't like our idea. No, you forgot to tell them your idea.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of stuff, but you forgot to communicate the idea in a way that they could buy.
What's even worse, Will, is I know this startup has customers. So
that's what I'm saying.
Just not communicating.
You bet. Yeah, it happens all the time. That's why we're here.
Well, I just want to focus again, just as a best practice, okay? Because this is where I do appreciate, I say this all the time, it's like, I thought I knew how to do pitch decks till I got here, and then I learned from Will Schroeder, and then I became the Mandalorian. Like, this is the way. But
it gets paid to say that, just so you know.
One technique that you taught me that I started incorporating was to have the headline say, the market is this big, but we're going to focus on this part of the market because of this.
Yep.
Talk us through, because I think that that's a great way to summarize. And if that all you had was that, I can accept a market slide like that.
Totally. Here's what a perfect market slide looks like. Let's go back to that market slide. A perfect market slide says this. Here's where we're going to start. And I know the team did that. That's why they said the beachhead, right? Here's where we're going to start. But what they missed was, and here's why. We're starting with independent hotels because they have the most need, because we have an unfair advantage in how we can get to them, because they tend to early adopt, because they have the fastest sales cycle. I'm going to give you $1 million. Why are you starting there? I need to know that in this market opportunity. Okay. Then what we're saying is, hey, if this works in that environment with those folks, with these independent hotels, this thing has a lot more legs in these adjacent markets among the independents, among the hotels. So all this slide needs to say is we're starting here because this is the best insertion point, beachhead, for how to spend our money right now. But if this thing works, holy cow, sky's the limit. There are so many other buyers out there for us to take it to.
You see the method to the madness. Let me demonstrate this, and then we can close this off. I'm working with a founder right now, and she said, I want to do an inventory management system for pet store, okay? And she's explaining this to me, and I said, that's a really wide, pervasive problem. Why? Like, what exactly is the problem? And to her credit, she went and surveyed the pet stores. And the number one problem that they want to stop, they didn't want an inventory management system. They wanted something that could track expiring inventory so they could put it out on sale and move it.
Oh, clever.
Because they're independent. I said, okay, let's do that. But then I said, now guess what? This is a gold mine, because if I'm an investor, I'm excited because this is not a problem just for pet stores. Right. So now, when she gets to her market later on, she could say, there are all these independent stores that need this solved, but I'm going to start with pet stores because I got contacts in the industry. We built it specifically for this. We have our suppliers, etc. But look at the blue sky ahead of us. If I can nail pet stores, and then I'm thinking as an investor, Will, even if you just get pet stores, that's a big enough market as it is. And we're going to be happy. We're going to make money. We'll be fine. But now you can really go unicorn with it.
Right. And I look at that and I say, okay, first thing that comes to mind, I put my investor hat on, which is, okay, you're talking about independent stores that can't afford an expensive inventory management system, but have expiring goods. Expiring goods to me is the key word there. Yeah. Where I'm saying how many other stores that fit that have expiring goods, right? And that alone gets exciting to me because I can see the value prop in that.
Yeah, and it shows the founder has thought this through. And everyone, I'm not trying to shoehorn our services into your lives, but just having someone like me and Will be able to talk to you, believe in your potential, and reflect back to you things you might not be seeing, that's the benefit of being part of Startups.com community, meeting other founders, actually verbalizing this and sitting in your basement, imagining, and you're just staring at your pitch deck and you don't know which way is up. You don't know, you can't see the forest beyond the trees. That's the benefit of what we provide, Will.
Yep, that's the thing. Just get out of your own head. And honestly, it's no different than if Ed and I were starting our own businesses. We would have to go find other people to get out of our heads. Like, it's not because we're some sort of like pitch deck Yoda. It's because you got to talk to other people about your idea in order to understand it.
Will, we do that for each other. Like every single day, you're bouncing stuff off me. I'm bouncing stuff off you. 100%. We need that. Okay, big question, Will. This is what I wanted to end off on. Knowing this, what we've all gone through, and we know these founders. Yeah. Does it unicorn, Will? Does it unicorn?
No. And bear with me. And I say that with a giant caveat. Not no because this idea isn't big enough. No, because this pitch deck didn't bring to the table the idea it was supposed to. Okay, so this pitch deck doesn't unicorn. Does the idea of getting in between the flow of hospitality and guests to get them into more experiences locally, et cetera, have a big opportunity? Hell yeah, it does. That just wasn't this pitch deck.
Right on.
Not in the way that it needed to be.
Yes, I say no, it won't unicorn because I don't think the founders can get there if this pitch deck is actually representative of how the founder is going to approach it. We know the opposite is the case. Do I believe the founders themselves could go unicorn? Yes, but I'm right there with you. This pitch deck doesn't do them any favors. In fact, it doesn't represent who they are.
Okay, so it happens all the time, right? It happens all the time. And that's where my frustration lies in just the pitch deck business as a whole, so to speak, right? The business of building pitch decks. We get all these great founders, and if they spend enough time with us, we're like, oh, damn, that's a really good idea. But just like everyone saw in this show today, a good idea and a good pitch deck aren't necessarily one and the same, right? I've seen so many good ideas get buried in bad pitch decks, and it kills me because I'm like, we gotta get this thing out of the shell and show it to the world. Now, a big part of why that happens, of why these good ideas get buried, is what we just said a second ago. It's because founders don't share them to the public, or public being just not them, until it's too late. The feedback you want in the first to 100th pass are not investors. Like, that's expensive feedback, right? You want to put this in front of other founders, pitch deck experts, etc. Whether you use me, Ed, Startups.com, that's not really the point. Whoever you use, right? It just needs to not be you. And you need about 100 iterations, as painful as that sounds. Anybody that's with us in the audience today, I know some of you who've been through this process who now have badass pitch decks, had to do 100 iterations. I can't do a pitch deck and do less than 100 iterations before it's even viewable. And I do this for a living. I've been doing this for over 30 years. It's hard. It just takes iteration.
We have founders that have raised over $100 million, 15 startups, that still are not getting their pitch decks and ask me and we bounce them back. And that's why, pro tip, everyone, I do an idea validation deck and I start pitching my startup day one. Even if I don't need money, I just make sure I start getting those reps in because I don't want to have to learn all that and get a rude awakening when I really do need the money.
Everyone thinks that a pitch deck is just for raising money. And obviously that's a clear use case of it. But the process of building a pitch deck is one of the most cathartic and important starting points for every startup because it forces you to answer a bunch of questions that you were avoiding before. And let me build on that just a little bit. It's pretty important. Actually, this is kind of funny. Ed, you and I both knew who I'm talking about. One of our former employees from Startups.com leaves Startups.com, goes to work at another company, hates it, and calls us up the past week, right? And he's like, guys, I've got to do a startup. I got to build a company. I'm like, okay, you came to the right place. And he's like, what should I do first? And I'm like, bro, you worked here for years. Are you kidding me right now? You're supposed to build a pitch deck. And he starts laughing. He's like, it's so weird to come back as a customer essentially versus an employee. But I'm telling him the same thing I'm telling all of you. Yes, you need to get a pitch deck. It's like, your calling card for capital. But what it actually does, just like you saw in everything we covered in the past hour, it forces you to get the idea out there. But here's what's most important. It gives it consequence, okay? Mm-hmm. If me and Ed are just bullshitting about an idea has no consequence. But the moment I say, hey, I'm going to have to pitch this for money, and if I don't get it right, if I don't have the right answer, there are consequences, then I can't bullshit any stuff anymore. Then I have to think, well, will this actually work? Do I have a supplier for this? Will these pro formas work? Did I look up customer acquisition costs? Because now my ass is on the line if I don't have those answers. The pitch deck forces consequence.
Not only that, just like Will's talking about, you will grow as a founder. You'll meet people you didn't expect to meet, potential customers. You'll get referrals. It is a wonderful way to start learning with consequence, not the artificial consequences. I tell my kids all the time, you should be really thankful I artificially consequence you here because when you're married and your job's on the line, and kids are looking at you, like it gets real. Like the stakes are very, very real. So you should be thankful. Sure, we want to provide that for all of you here and provide that environment where you can safely practice. Will, what's your final encouragement for everyone?
Final encouragement is don't sweat getting one of these slides perfectly right every time. You actually can't do it. The goal for every iteration is to get 1% better. And while that sounds minor right now, it's because most of the next percent will come from what you learned from the last percent. It's not like you just magically all of a sudden get it 100% right. That never happens, okay? So what you need to do is all these reps, all these iterations until it finally starts to develop into what it was meant to be. That's how you build a pitch deck.
Will, I can say I learn something every time we do one of these. Always a pleasure.
I feel great about it.
Everyone, thanks for hanging out in the audience. Once again, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment, let us know, share it with some founders you think would be extremely helpful. It'll make you popular, fun at parties. We are here every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesdays, we do pitch decks. Wednesday, we do growth hacking, traction hacking. And Thursday, we do Q&A. We talk about all the little nuggets of wisdom that you want to hear as founders. Thanks again, Will. Appreciate you. We'll see you next time.
Love it, man. See you guys.